When you think of someone messing with the wrong Ark, what comes to mind? Maybe you're thinking of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where some Nazis get zapped by electromagnetic rays when they try to steal it. Or maybe you're thinking of that time that Ron and Harry messed around with Godric's Hollow in Harry Potter. Both of these stories have something in common. They're both fictional. Today, we're going to look at a story from Scripture about a man named Uzzah, who tried to mess with the Ark of the Covenant and lived to regret it. We'll look at the context, some background information, what we can learn from it, and how this story is still relevant for us today. We'll start with a quick recap of what happened. When the Ark was being brought back to Jerusalem after being captured by the Philistines, King David wanted to celebrate. So he organized a massive procession to bring it back in style. There were musicians, dancers, and most importantly, the Ark itself. It was placed on a cart like a VIP transport, and 2 oxen were used to pull it. As they were bringing the Ark to its destination, the oxen stumbled violently. And to make matters worse, the Ark started shaking, as if it might fall off the cart. This must have been pretty scary, considering that the Ark was considered to be the dwelling place of God himself. In a moment of panic, one of the men with the procession named Uzzah reached out to help steady the Ark. But as soon as he did, God struck him down and he died right there. Then the procession stopped immediately and everyone stared in shock as this man lay lifeless next to the Ark. After seeing this, King David was overcome with fear, and everyone else was terrified. The first thing I want to notice is the mood in the beginning. Verse 6 says that the Ark of God was being carried in a new cart, which means that the Levites had put it on there carefully. The priests were excited because this was a big deal. Not only was the Ark coming home after being held captive by the enemy, but it was also getting a makeover. Everything was going well until verse 6. The oxen stumbled violently, and this phrase tells us that things took a turn for the worse. Suddenly everything changed. The mood went from celebratory and joyful to suspenseful and fearful. All the instruments stopped playing. No one dared to speak, and all they could think about was what would happen next. The oxen were panicking. The Ark was shaking and it seemed like it might fall. The stakes couldn't be higher because if the Ark fell, who knows what would happen. This created a huge amount of suspense. In verse 7, Uzzah had this instinctive reaction that many of us can relate to. He saw the Ark wobbling and felt this overwhelming urge to do something, so he reached out his hand to steady it. But here's the kicker. Touching the Ark of the Covenant was a big no-no. Seriously, it was like the ultimate rule. Anyone who dared to lay a hand on it faced dire consequences. You might be wondering, why didn't Uzzah know this? Well, the Bible doesn't really spell it out, but let's think about a couple of things. For one, Uzzah could have been pretty young, caught up in the excitement of the moment. I mean, this was a festive occasion, right? With all the celebrations and joy in the air, he probably thought it was just a happy event, not realizing things could take a turn for the worse. And even if he did know the rules, panic can do crazy things to us. Picture it. The Ark is shaking, and in that split second, he might have thought, I just need to push it back on the cart and get out of here. Unfortunately, that split-second decision turned out to be a costly mistake. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes, even in our best intentions, we can overlook the boundaries that are meant to keep us safe. What do you think? Isn't it wild how one moment can change everything? And here's the crazy thing. Verse 7 says that as soon as he did that, God instantly struck him down, and he died right there. Imagine the look on Uzzah's face when that happened. 1 second he was reaching out to help, and the next second he was dead. It makes you wonder, did Uzzah feel pain? Did he suffer for a long time? Or was it instant? We don't know. But what we do know is that in that moment there was no warning, no second chance. It was immediate and final. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. God was unfair. He should have given Asa more time to react. But let me ask you this. Would you rather have known the rules and broken them anyway? Or were you glad that God was just and fair and didn't allow you to sin without consequence? I believe that God does give us warnings so that we can avoid danger, but ultimately, we have a choice. Either we choose to follow God and obey His word, or we choose to ignore his voice and do our own thing. And the consequences of our decisions will either be good or bad based on our choices. So remember, we reap what we sow. In verse 8, the mood completely changes. It says that David was frightened when he saw Uzzah's judgment. But why was he afraid? Why did this affect him so much? To answer that question, let's look at verse 9. It says that David felt deep within himself that God was holy. He realized that God was above him and didn't deserve to be treated casually. That's why David stopped the procession immediately. He knew that he couldn't continue celebrating like everything was fine after seeing what happened to Uzzah. David knew that he needed to treat God with reverence and respect. He didn't want to be responsible for another death. So what should we learn from this story? First, never touch the Ark of God. Okay, I'm joking. You can touch it. Just don't expect to live. Second, we should always listen to God's instructions. We shouldn't assume that he'll be lenient if we break his laws. Uzzah may have assumed that since everyone else was celebrating, it would be okay for him to do the same. But unfortunately, he learned the hard way that God's rules apply to everyone. Third, we need to remember that God is holy, and we aren't. That means that God deserves to be worshipped and respected, and we don't. We can't compare ourselves to God or try to understand his ways. We should recognize our own limitations and acknowledge that he's in control. Finally, we should always be prepared to meet God. We don't know when that will happen, but we can be sure that it will happen. So let's always strive to live according to his word. Think about it. If God could strike down someone as righteous as Uzzah for simply touching the ark, how much more dangerous is it to disobey him in other ways? How should we respond to this story? Should we be terrified of God? Well, yes, but in a good way. Let me explain. We should be afraid of God's judgment if we disobey him, but we should also be filled with awe and wonder when we consider his power and holiness. We should tremble at his presence, but also rejoice in his love for us. And that's exactly what David did. Verse 13 says that David was afraid of God that day, and he didn't want to carry the ark with him anymore. Instead, he sent it back to the house of Obed-Edom. But verse 14 says that God blessed Obed-Edom and his family for accepting the ark. So David chose to be afraid of God, but that decision led him to blessing. In the end, the ark returned to the temple where it belonged, and David and Israel were able to experience God's favor again. God's presence is a powerful thing, and when we remember that he's with us, it should inspire us to live holy lives. So let's take a moment to thank God for his love and mercy, and let's remember that he's worthy of our worship and praise. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe so that we can keep making more videos in the future. Thanks for watching.